Hello, YouTubers. Today or tonight, whenever you're watching this, I am doing another Marvel Fox movie review. And basically, tonight's slash today's slash tonight's, however you want to put it, is the review on X-Men The Last Stand. Okay, basically, the whole story, the whole premise, which I give X-Men The Last Stand more lenient, more relaxing room, less stress than on basically Spider-Man 3 or The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because looking at X-Men The Last Stand, there's like at least three storylines crammed into one. Three or two storylines crammed in one X-Men movie. If you look at Spider-Man 3, there's three villains, three villains, uh, three story arcs crammed into one movie. There's the Amazing Spider-Man 2, where there's two and a half, I'll say, two and a half villains. Yeah, Rano is in the movie, like in the beginning and end, and that's it. But not really throughout the whole movie. Unlike Green Goblin and Electro, you basically got the love story between Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and the whole conflict between Electro and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and Green Goblin and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. Plus the storyline with Green Goblin dying, getting sick and near to death. But anyway, basically in the correct timeline, X-Men is basically, here we are now, actually in the correct path of after First Class, Origins Wolverine, the first X-Men movie, the second X-Men movie, is the actual fifth X-Men movie that's placed in the X-Men correct timeline. And basically the story of this is, like I said earlier, is kind of like three or two storylines crammed in one movie. Because basically you got the cure, they found a mutant that basically takes away your mutant powers, at least for a certain extent of time. Remember that. And then you got like the Jean Grey Phoenix story. So yeah, basically two storylines. And basically, as we got hinted at the end of X2, X-Men United, that basically for a certain amount of time in that movie we thought Jean Grey died, and then at the end when Jean Grey was narrating at the end of the movie, that basically we saw like this fiery bird float in the water, and that let us know that Jean Grey was still alive. Well, basically X-Men 3, The Last Stand, is basically confirmed it even more, is that yes, she was still alive, because basically the water should have vaporized her, but it didn't, because her powers wrapped her up in this cocoon. And since it wrapped her in this cocoon, her powers basically took over her while she was a conscience in the water, while she was wrapped in the cocoon. And basically, I'm trying Um, in the beginning of the movie, we see her basically young. 20, it labeled 20 years ago. Although we do see Stan Lee in this X-Men movie. I heard that we see him in a few X-Men movies, like I want to say X-Men First Class, X-Men Origins Wolverine, I think X2, X-Men United, but definitely in this, because I did catch Stan Lee, always catch Stan Lee in X-Men The Last Stand. But 20 years ago, see young Jean, Professor X walking, about kind of old Professor X walking with Magneto, getting Jean Grey as a child to recruit her for Professor X's school, and then jumping 10 years, 10 years kind of later, 10 years later, but also 10 years ago, we see the new ambassador, kind of the new ambassador, or at least I want to put it, his son, which we do find out that his son is a mutant, and he disgraces him because he is a mutant, and how he hates mutants, or quotes that he doesn't hate mutants, he just wants to help them, but he actually does, which is, as we all know, his son is Angel, which this is where we first get introduced to Angel in the X-Men movies. And then jumping forward, we see like a training, a cool comic book reference, but also like but also kind of like glimpse into the future, because it did quote that future, not in this term, but in a way, easily put it this way, glimpses of what's about to come, which basically we see them basically, as we find out after, is that it's a training section underneath the mansion. It's kind of like PE training for the X-Men, for the future group of X-Men, and basically they're running away from the Sentinels, the comic book looking Sentinels, and basically we see cars on fire, ground is dirt to ash, apocalypse, basically the world, and basically in this training scene, which we also get introduced to, not really so much Kitty, which she's which I think that's also part of her superhero name, Shadow Kitty or Shadow Cat, whatever. Because in the first original X-Men movie, we saw her get reference in by Senator Kelly, that a girl could walk through walls, and then we saw her in X2, X-Men United, like for a few scenes, and then which we also did see Kitty, and not just get referenced by Senator Kelly from the very first X-Men movie, but also a short scene of her walking through and out of the class of Professor X. But we see her more now, a different actress, because from the first movie to the second movie, it was two different actresses. Now they choose a third new actress, to play, which I did like the actress. I love her, and I take that back. Now these days, he, because just like as the character he played in uh, the Umbrella Academy in real life, she turned into a he. So, but when she did do the X-Men during the time, she was a she. So, but I do like the actor. He is so from basically this moment on, I am gonna be stating he. So basically, he was very good in the movie. I did like him and the X-Men and in the Umbrella Academy. He is a really good actor. So, um, which we also get to, which we got to introduce, and also saw, got introduced is, for the first time is, Colossus. Which, no, it wasn't Colossus design from Deadpool. It was, which that's more comic book accurate, CGI comic book accurate. It was more of a new design, CGI new design of kind of realisticalism, and which we do get to see Colossus, Kitty, and if I'm saying his name right in the movie, the character's name right, and Iceman again in Days of Future Past, which Iceman's character is got like a bit of a love triangle going, not a gay one. They still kept the basically straight Iceman storyline, not the not introduced quickly comic book storyline, which like I said in that last video review, the X2 X-Men United, is that I'm glad they didn't, because it would have felt rushed. It would have felt not really it wouldn't feel anything positive. So basically, they still kept the love triangle was between Iceman, Kitty, and Rogue, going back to Iceman. And basically, Iceman, even though there was a few scenes of Kitty saving Iceman, and it wasn't really much, and Iceman looked like he was flirting, like those two were flirting, they really weren't, and Rogue was getting mad because basically she can't really touch him without, like, physical touching without him dying from her powers. So basically, that honestly, that's part of the storyline, is where she goes to the building she knows that has a certain building that has the cure, so she could go and get the cure. So she no longer has her powers and can basically be physical with Iceman, where she can get iced up. But even though she knew that basically either other way, Iceman still loved her for her and not really caring so much about physical. Um, um, so there is basically that short storyline. We also get to see at the end of the movie the battle between Iceman and Pyro, which that's a cool short fighting scene. I like how they basically went like so. And then I also liked how Iceman defeated Pyro, where Pyro thought he got the upper hand, and when Iceman basically turned all ice and like an ice cube, and then just basically head knocked out Pyro, which as in X2 X-Men United, I forgot to say that basically the girl that Wolverine fought, that he basically killed her with the adamantium. I want to say that she actually didn't die like she was supposed to, but she actually didn't and survived, because in Deadpool and Wolverine, she was in the negative void, or not the negative void, or, well, quickly stating the negative void, that basically that's outside the reality of each multiverse, the MCU, as we saw in Loki, because we saw her with Toad and Sabretooth. So basically, and just like Pyro, he was probably meant to die on and X-Men: The Last Stand, but he survived, and that was a problem for some reason, a problem to Kang, and he sent the, I'm guessing he sent the time police to capture them and send them to the negative void, because we see them in the negative void with the twin sister of Professor X, and Deadpool and Wolverine. Spoiler alert with that. I haven't seen it, but if nobody knows that, spoiler alert. Anyway, so yeah, and then which we also originally get introduced to Beast for the first time in the X-Men movies until X-Men First Class, which plus take place even before X-Men Origins Wolverine. And which we already see him all blue, Beast out, works for the government, and he meets the mutant that they have to help to basically take his blood, so he could, because he's part of the cure, because of his ability, immune powers, basically take away your immune, because once he meets him and Beast goes out to handshake his hand, Beast sees his hand goes from blue, furry blue, back to human. And then after he talks to the kid and looks at his human hand, he goes back and his hand basically goes from human back to furry blue. So if you didn't catch that the first time you watched it, it would be a surprise of the post-credit scene that happens later on. But before getting into that, so basically, Angel's dad was the main guy that helped produce the money for the cure and everything. So Magneto goes after him, and after he finds out that Jean has survived, and after Professor X basically he acted like he didn't, but he knew for sure that she survived, which Cyclops, after the training scene, which the training scene at the X-Men mansion, we see a comic book accurate of the Sentinel's head, which pleased fans a lot, which once we got to Days of Future Past, that's actually not what we got, even though we did get it a little bit, just not really fully comic book accurate. Anyway, after that, Wolverine did something to piss off Storm. Storm wasn't happy about it, because basically he asked Colossus to throw him, and Wolverine took off the Sentinel's head. So basically, and then Wolverine told Storm, like, he's just a sub, he was just passing through, and then and then, well, he just told Storm that he was a sub. If she had a problem, take it up with Scott. Scott, then it switched to Scott. That we see Scott basically breaking down, froze up, curled up into a ball, emotional break, still. So I want to say it's like a few months, few days. Well, not days, not months, but at least a year, a fucking year, that basically he's still emotional break over Jean's death, which he's at the point thinking he's hallucinating, that he is hearing Jean's in his head screaming Scott. And then once he packed up a bag, gonna leave the mansion, Wolverine bumped into him and said, basically, which they kind of got into a fight because he's like, hey, everybody was waiting for you, where were you? And he's like, why do you care? And he's like, you're my friend, I do care. And he's like, and he's like, I didn't ask you to step in for me. He's like, no, the professor did, but I was just passing through. And Cyclops was like, so pass through. And then Logan was calmed down and was trying to be friendly to Cyclops. I'm like, oh no, look, yes, what happened to Jean was terrible and it wasn't right and stuff. I know how you feel, which he actually does. He went through watching X-Men Origins Wolverine. You basically know he went through a lot of shit. Anyway, but Cyclops didn't want to hear it, like every emotional person, and just left the mansion. But before he left the mansion, he told Wolverine that not everybody heals as fast as you. Left the mansion, went back to Alkali Lake, where she died, and he starts to hear her more and more and stronger. And that's when we see her rise out of the water. After he lasers it basically broke her power is getting strong, and her voice in his head was getting stronger, and it hurt him to the point where he got so angry and just lasered out in the water. And apparently it was where the cocoon was, and I think that's where that's what it needed to free Jean Grey out of the cocoon, was to break the cocoon. So once Cyclops lasered through the water as much as it hit the water, and it was to the point where it did hit the cocoon, where it freed her and she rose out of the water. And then there was like a small moment where Cyclops and her talked. A bit of Jean was trying to break free, trying to stay awake, full control, but it wasn't Jean fully that finished talking to Scott. Basically convinced Scott to take off his cool sunglasses, and then convinced him to take off his cool sunglasses, and that her powers was strong enough where she could control to hold back his laser eyes, and show his normal looking colored eyes. And then they kissed, which it started his skin started to do something. And then all of a sudden when we went back to the mansion, something set Professor X's power off. Everybody felt it. That was in the mansion. Professor X told Logan and Storm to go to Alkali Lake. They went, to Alkali Lake. That's where they found Jean laying on the ground, conscious. Logan found Scott's sunglasses just floating in the air. And then they take her back to the mansion. And that's where Logan finds out basically, yes, the professor. The one after the professor met Jean and took her back, he put a barrier around her powers where there was like, nice way to put it, a child lock. There was a child lock on her powers where basically there was a certain amount where once she got older and once she knew fully how to control each small chunk of her power, each child lock unlocked. Well, there was and over time he mentioned that each time when he checked her head, her power of how many child locks was left, her powers grew this monster, this entity that basically he called the Phoenix. Now Logan asked if she was aware. Did Professor X know if she was aware? No, he did not know if she was aware or not. Now, yes, I get it. This was a big difference from the comics because they went to outer space. Fire cloud went inside of Jean, and that's what became the Phoenix. But do I like this storyline just a tad bit better? Yes, and I will explain more why once I get to X-Men Apocalypse, because it also helps with that situation as well. So buckle up, wait for that review. Yeah. Anyway. So basically, after we get that storyline of her powers forming the Phoenix, now he doesn't know if he could lock the Phoenix back up, put those child locks back up. Hopefully wake up Jean Grey. Hopefully she has the strength to wake up and that Jean Grey isn't fully dead. As she wakes up, Logan and her, after a few moments of Logan and her almost have Humpty Dumpty. And basically the X-Men hospital room. He asked her what happened to Scott by showing her his sunglasses. Then she starts to break down because there was a bit of Jean Grey there, but also the Phoenix. And once Jean Grey gets back to conscience and he shows her Scott's sunglasses, she starts to break down again, starts losing control. The Phoenix gets back into the wheel and shatters the sunglasses, almost basically destroys the whole entire X-Men hospital room, and walks away. Once Magneto finds out Jean Grey was still alive, but extremely deadly powerful, he goes and finds her. Well, at the same time, basically, Professor X and Magneto show up at the same time at the house she grew up in. And basically there was a whole action scene after basically Professor X trying to help Jean get back to her mind, and Magneto, well, he's fine with Magneto as well, because Magneto's trying to convince her to join him, to basically don't listen to him. He just wants to control you, which, okay, yes, at this point of time, I do believe that basically Professor X has been mind controlling each member of his X-Men. Doesn't matter. Each member that joined his school, that basically became his X-Men, because he's so scared to lose his precious X-Men, and all he cared about, yes, he is worried about protecting them, protecting each mutant kind. Yes, that is something real. But he over time, once the X-Men grew, he got more and more scared of losing that, and basically wanting to control that as much as he can so he doesn't lose that, because he feels like once he knew he did, then basically he wouldn't have any toys to play with. So so basically, back and forth, the X-Men, basically back and forth between Magneto and Professor X is right on both sides. On both of their sides, you can agree with both sides, Magneto and Professor X. Both sides are not that bad. Both sides have a certain good point to stand on. That little gray area. But other than that, getting past that, because that will be more longer if I go on. Kind of. But, moving past that, Jean basically accidentally killing Professor X, or at least we thought, by basically shattering him with her powers, which also in the movie, joining the bad side, we get introduced for the first time in movie form, Juggernaut, and, a mutant that basically can multiply himself. I think he's called the Multiplier or something like that in the comics. But Magneto walks away with Jean. The only thing that's left of Professor X that Wolverine and Storm finds and cries over is his wheelchair, because they're so upset of losing Professor X. And they have the next scene after that, we see that they have a funeral for him, and have a tombstone, a really big one. And then before they have tombstone for Scott, which is kind of sad, but and then which we see most of the X-Men members and a little bit of the students around the school cry over losing their teacher, their principal, their leader, Professor X, and so going from there, we finish out the Phoenix story and the Mutant Cure story by Wolverine kind of leaving and coming back, trying to convince. He leaves, goes where Jean is, because Jean gets into starts getting into Wolverine's head, and he goes where he finds the camp that Magneto is at, and he tries to convince her to come home. When reality, all that's there once he gets there is the Phoenix. And then he goes back telling Storm that yes, he fucked up by leaving, but even though he right when he left, he told her that there's still Jean in there, that he misses her, he still loves her. But once he gets back, he says, yes, I know I messed up, but we need to go now, because Magneto has an army and Jean, and we're doomed. Well, before that, we see Magneto basically kind of feeding the Phoenix's power by basically, yes, he can only control metal, but you, my dear, can control basically anything that comes into mind. And then from there, that's when we have the Wolverine fighting scene with the other mutants, and basically kind of with Magneto, and while he's talking to Jean, and then he goes back to the X-Mansion, getting warred up, and so is everyone. Which he does make a speech to the team because Iceman said we're a few members down, and Wolverine said, yes, we lost the professor, we lost Scott, but we lost Jean. Most of all, we lost Jean. But if we don't do anything now, if we don't stand and fight, there is no point of keeping this school alive. There is no point for any of it, because if we don't do anything now, their lives would be meaningless. And then once Beast, Iceman, Kitty, and Colossus Ghost walk towards the plane, Storm asks Wolverine. Wolverine says they're ready, and Storm's like, yeah, but are you ready? Once the time comes. And then he pauses and then sees her walk away, and then towards the jet, and he starts walking, and then they get to the battlefield, and we see this big huge fight climax. They get the kid, they save the kid, they basically stop Magneto by using the cure against him, and then after they cure him, all that's left to stop is Jean, is the Phoenix. And basically all that's left is to stop Jean Grey, the Phoenix. And basically Wolverine tries to talk to Jean Grey to stop her, while she's basically destroying everything on the island, whatever's left on the island. And basically while he tries to walk towards her, and you see most of the X-Men suit disappear, like burns off with most of his skin, and his skin, and while watching his skin reheal by, like, on his cheek, his chin, almost his whole entire face, his whole entire chest, and then right when he gets towards her, she asked him, "You did this for him? You sacrificed yourself for them?" And he's like, "No, not for them, for you." Which knocked the Phoenix out of the basically the steering wheel, and basically brings Jean back to the control of the steering wheel, and she starts crying, and she says sorry, and please kill me, stop me, kill me. Basically before the Phoenix gets back into control, and Wolverine basically says, "I love you," for basically, in a way, one last time, before popping out his claws and stabbing her in the stomach. She smiles. The black of her power fades away. The black power of the Phoenix fades away before she smiles, and then once she smiles, you could tell she was gonna try and say thank you. And then she falls back dead, and then he starts crying, holding her dead body. And then the last few ending scenes of the movie, we see basically now a tombstone right next to Professor X is Scott and Jean Grey, and then Scott's tombstones, and then we see Professor X tombstone. while Jean Grey's basically looking at all three of them, wanting to say something, hopefully to find guidance. Because at that moment she's lost, and then we see Rogue sitting in Iceman room in Bobby's room, and then when Bobby opens his door, we see Rogue sitting on his bed, and basically they have emotional scene where he's like, I didn't want this, and she's like, I know, but I did. And then you could tell they went into a kiss, and then the last scene of the movie, we see Magneto playing chess, like always, as we always see Professor X and Magneto always playing chess with each other or by themselves. And we see Magneto's hand, because he's playing with a regular chessboard with metal pieces, chess pieces. And he goes like this, as he normally does to control control metal. And then we kind of see the metal chess piece move a little bit, and then shocking if you really forgot the whole scene of basically it doesn't stay effective when Beast went to visit the kid. Okay, yeah, which also could have created the theory of, okay, yeah, maybe step away from the kid and may return, but as the cure, it could have stayed forever. But more strongly known rising, they were leaning more towards to the kid's ability instead of adding extra shit to the cure for it to stay. Of course, it's not going to stay for long. Once we saw Beast Blue Fur returning. So shocking scene, not finding out the little metal chess piece moved because Magneto went like this and his power returned. And then jumping past through the credits, we see the doctor, what's her name? Her character got reintroduced to in X-Men First Class, but anyway, Mora Retaggart or something like that. Mora Retaggart. Forgive me for saying the name wrong, but her in the movie as a hospital doctor, and then she turns around and looks at a male's body in a coma that magically represents the actor that's playing the old version of Professor X, and he wakes up using the voice of the old version Professor X, saying, "Hi, I'm back," or how did we do, or hi, whatever, that part I kind of skipped over a little bit. All I knew is that he awaked in a new body, still looking like Patrick Stewart or something like that. I think Patrick Stewart. I want to say, and then the post credit scene, which that was the post credit scene, ended after she said, "You're back," or I think he says that, "I'm back," and then the post credit scene ended. And then basically we jump a few years later, we get X-Men Origins Wolverine, then X-Men First Class, then Days of Future Past. But doing it timeline wise, it goes X-Men First Class, X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men X2, X-Men United, and then this one, X-Men The Last Stand. Then the next one that I'm gonna review, which is tomorrow, correct timeline wise, before Days of Future Past and after The Last Stand, is the Wolverine. The second Wolverine movie years later after X-Men Origins Wolverine. So, drop your comments down below of what your just anything, whatever you thought about the X-Men Last Stand, your favorite X-Men movie, favorite X-Men character, favorite Marvel character, favorite X-Men comic, favorite Marvel comic, anything Marvel, anything X-Men. Just drop it in the comments down below, or your opinion on this video review. Please hit that like button if you liked this video. Please, or if you didn't like this video, please hit that dislike button. If you're a newcomer, randomly dropping by one of my videos, randomly, please hit that subscribe button, because I welcome all new and old subscribers with open arms. If you're a old original subscriber, welcome back. I appreciate all old original subscribers always coming back to each single of my videos. Have a nice day, have a nice night whenever you're watching this. Peace.